you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson, pastor of Central Presbyterian Church, and your host for this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Today, the topic of our discussion is breaking the criminal cycle. Hear what Travis County District Attorney Ronnie Earl had to say about it.
As those institutions of love have decayed, that's only left the law. And so in that sense, the criminal justice system is overwhelmed. The criminal justice system is being called upon to substitute for a social policy that doesn't work and for an economic policy that doesn't work.
Breaking the criminal cycle. What can we do about it? We hope to find some answers to the question from our two guests, and also by viewing a portion of a television documentary produced by the Catholic Diocese of Austin. Our guests today are Joan Goodwin, who works for TEC and Project Rio, and Dutz DeFore, Director of the Prison Ministry of the Diocese of Austin. And we welcome both you folks.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And I think, Joan, I'd like to have you tell us a little bit about, I know you're an information specialist with Project Rio. Does that have to do with the Rio Grande?
It has to do with hopefully getting Texas parolees jobs. The Rio stands for Reintegration of the Offender.
Okay. And how do you go about doing that?
Well, we network for employers that are willing to hire parolees. We have about 12,000 employers in Texas now that are willing to hire parolees. We haven't had many complaints from them, probably less about the parolees than just all the other regular workers. The biggest complaints from the employers has been that they don't stay with us.
Okay. In other words, the people who come out of prison may get some jobs, but then they don't stick with it.
Well, a lot of times they're minimum wage jobs, or maybe they have skills, but they're willing to take whatever they can get right away because they don't have any money when they get out, and they have to get established, start making some money right away. So then they go on and get hopefully a better job.
But it's not easy to sustain the efforts of employment, is what you're saying, after folks are out. And you find the same thing?
They change. We have a program that runs every week. We call it reentry, for ex-offenders in the community to sit down and drink coffee and have cookies once a week on Wednesday night. And this program sort of deals with this, and it provides a place they can go and talk freely, because they can't talk freely in the community. They talk about their incarceration, talk about their problems and frustrations, that sort of thing. A lot of times that's just not accepted. But we talk about those things on Wednesday night, and we sort of find out how everybody, whether they're dry and clean, whether they're getting jobs. If they're not getting jobs, we talk about what to do to get jobs. And it's a question of motivation primarily. Once they want to get a job, they'll get out and get that job. But as Joni says, they'll get an entry-level job somewhere, and they begin to gain some understanding of the work process, get some money, realize they've got to do better, and then they'll move on to another job, which is normal.
Well, that'd be a sign of progress, actually.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it, yeah.
Well, now, how many do you have in this reentry program?
Well, we've gone on for about 5 years, and I guess we've had something over 1,000 people come through it. Right now, just about 6 or 8 of us, and we go up to 25. It depends on the, it must be the phase of the moon or something, I don't know. But the parole office is aware of this, but one of our problems is get the parole people to recognize that they must take advantage of these resources in the community, and they haven't really gotten that across yet. Even to the people who run the halfway houses, they just do this as a job, and they're not really reaching out to the community to help with those people in the halfway house. They're not doing that.
So they may not really know that much about the fact that there are such reentry programs available, or if they do know, then they're not necessarily motivated to move folks towards you.
The whole process has got to understand that we're in the business of rehabilitation. When someone is captured, when someone is taken up by the law, what we really know about that person, that they have a problem. And what we've been doing with them up to this point in time is putting them away in some sterile environment where they've just been postponing the activity that got them there in the first place. We haven't been dealing with that problem. If we do not deal with that problem, then we're going to be living with that problem forever. That's what we're talking about with rehabilitation. And it has to, we're developing our next generation of prison inmates in the community here right now, and we're not doing a lot about it.
Okay, well, I think that what we're doing now is backing off from some of the immediate responses and rather well-focused programs and seeing the problem as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the diocese here has produced a film along that line, and let's take a look at that. Okay. And then we'll have a chance to comment on that and help that give us that larger picture.
To make a change in our criminal justice system, we must attack the problem at the start. We must reach our youth through the institutions of family, school, and church, hopefully reducing the numbers entering the system. To work with those already in trouble, we must take an approach of changing lifestyles and attitudes, not of imprisonment. We will not be able to make a change in the criminal justice system without first eliminating the situations that lead to criminal lifestyles.
But I think that government has to play a more active role, and so do the churches. We have to begin to reweave the fabric of community by weaving together the church and the government in a new partnership, maintaining the separation of church and state, but combining the concept of spirituality and politics, because there's no reason to separate those two. We have to join those two. We have to have political activity that reflects the goodness of our own people.
November '84, they woke me up after 9 years in prison and put me out on the street. And I was afraid. And I left my Bible at the back, at the gate. I was afraid. I was actually lost. So when I got to the streets, I didn't know what to do. And I was, by me living in a life of being withdrawn, it was easy to withdraw. And I just withdrew. And I stayed out about a year, and I was back in prison.
You have no idea how hard it is. And in 1985, it was even harder for women getting out of prison, trying to get a job. I would go out for different jobs, and I would take their tests, their typing tests, their 10-key, whatever it was, and I would do okay. I would get to the interview part. Everything would be going really well, and then all of a sudden, when I get to the part that I say, I think I need to let you know that I'm an ex-offender and I'm in a halfway house, then a wall just, you can practically see it go up, and the air just becomes real thick, and all of a sudden they say, okay, Miss Goodwin, we'll call you. I have yet for any of those people to call me. When someone gets out of the penitentiary, they need to know that there are people out here that care about them, that are willing to help them. They need to know that.
Well, the community must be involved, as opposed to whining, complaining that we have too many people in prison, or there's too much graffiti, or there's too much crime. The community needs to quit whining, and they need to stand up. They need to tell their legislators that they really have had enough, and they're willing to pay for, and they're willing to spend some time, they're willing to be involved to get the situation turned around.
If people want to do something really significant about crime, want to really get tough on crime, go rock a crack baby. Go rock a crack baby. Go be a volunteer courtesy aunt or uncle to a family that doesn't, a young family, a young teenage mother and her young teenage husband, father of that child, who don't know how to parent, and help them learn how to parent. Teach them how to parent. Teach them things like anger control.
I think, I believe with all my heart, that unless we come together on this issue, it will be our downfall. We can no longer afford to just simply put people in prisons or incarcerate them, particularly for short periods of time. We're too intelligent a society. We're too intelligent to not be able to mobilize, come together. We know what practices to use. We know how to educate. We know how to rehabilitate. We need to try to not be nearly as overwhelmed as we've been in the past. And we need to sink our resources, whether it be financial, and it isn't just financial. It's a human resources. We need to reinvest that in the human beings of our society and our local community, as well as the community as a large.
The community at large that is just spoken of there is something that, as we discussed earlier in the program, is the issue of how do we get more people involved to respond to what we all recognize as just really an out-of-control situation as far as the breakdown of the criminal justice system and the criminal cycle that is being perpetuated. And I think we'd be a little less than modest if we say we have the whole answer here today. But I think if we can just let our viewers pick up on one or two things that can be done. I mean, for instance, Ronnie Earl was saying you might find a crack baby. Someone just...
What Ronnie's talking about is real simple. It says, don't sit up there and criticize all these things that are going on. Get in there and try to do something about them. Because young families do not know how to deal with frustration. They do not know how to deal with these things. They wind up getting... young families wind up with children before their time. But as I say, we're developing the next generation of prison inmates in our community right now by failing to parent the children who need parenting and who are going through the unfortunate problems of neglect and abuse, and wind up in the criminal justice system by just default.
Okay, well, how would someone find a way to help a family that needs reinforcement and support?
The schools have certain things going on, and Austin Metropolitan Ministries is working with schools to help provide mentoring programs for young children. They are trying to provide support groups for older children in high school, and these groups provide some stability to those young children that they can look forward to and be with people who are stable and normal and enjoy the association and gain from that, because their main problem in life is to find somebody who cares.
Okay, so if you just have a one-on-one approach, that people are called to say, I can't go and lobby the legislature for the change in the policies that are perpetuating this thing, I can at least find a kid that I can work with.
That's right, but they need to sort of do a little bit with the legislature too, because the legislature reacts to what people tell it. And if you don't tell it anything, the guys who are telling it something are going to influence what happens.
Okay, well, we'll come back to that one. Let's stay a little closer to home for now. Employers can do something.
Certainly.
Take a risk.
They can give these men and women an opportunity to go to work, an opportunity to get started on the road to success instead of the road back to prison. I know, speaking of the legislature, another thing that could happen conceivably would be that they would legislate that anyone who goes to prison has to at least complete a GED before they're eligible for parole. One thing that would open the door for jobs that might otherwise be closed to them.
Well, I'm going to have to close the door to our program just for a few minutes now because we're time for a break, but I'll reopen it in just a few seconds. Stay with us on this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue as we discuss how to break the criminal cycle.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live. But we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627, because serving Austin means serving you.
We're back on Austin Faith Dialogue, and our topic today is breaking the criminal cycle. And just before we took the break, Joan, you were giving us something about how, in a way, you have had a personal experience of this. I know you were on that tape as one who had come out of the system.
Right.
And tell us about the turning point for you.
It was, it happened while I was in a halfway house. I was paroled to New Directions halfway house in Houston, and what I found there was people that cared about me, or they were telling me they did. They were telling me, "I love you, Joni," and different things like that, and I was thinking, what do they want from me? You know, because that's the kind of people I'd always been around. It was always something for something, never something for nothing. And I found people there that really did care, and that was a turning point for me. And so many people complain about halfway houses, even for all the good they're doing. I went back to work at that halfway house, and I worked there for about 6.5 years, and it did a lot of good, and it helped a lot of people turn their lives around. And then all the neighbors got all up in arms, and they decided they didn't want it to be there, and so they had demonstrations and all that and things on TV. Get the hoods out of the hood and blah, blah, blah. And crime hadn't risen in that area because of the halfway houses being there. I know there was a study done at Harvard or one of those Ivy League universities a few years back, and what they said was that if everyone from all the prisons in the United States was released on any given day, that crime would only rise by about 1%.
And that's because
the crime's already out here. It's happening all around you. And the people in the halfway houses, most of them are trying to get started again, to turn their life around. I've heard people say of people that went back to prison 3 and 4 times, well, they must like it, they keep going back. Well, that's not true. It's just hard to get it turned around. Once you get that down cycle started, it's hard to get it into the up cycle. And you've got to have a little help to do that. But you've also got to be willing to take responsibility for your mistakes and for what you did wrong, and you've got to be willing to pay those consequences and to clean up the wreckage of the past. You've got to be willing to do that.
Well, that's a very powerful statement for you to share that with us, that this is based on your own experience. You have to take personal responsibility for who you are and what you've done.
Sure.
And at the same time, those of us out in the community have to take responsibility for if you've got something like a halfway house in the area that is doing well in rehabilitation, not panicking and thinking that somehow that's going to ruin the neighborhood.
Yeah, the problem is that when people are released from prison, they need to be accepted back in the community, and that's not necessarily the case. The community itself has to get involved. The way we find that people make that, the only way out of this whole process is a spiritual awakening. The 12-step programs have nailed it down. AA has figured this thing out, and over millions of people over many countries throughout many years, they have figured it out. The spiritual awakening, because what people have in this prison cycle are drug and alcohol problem to the great extent, and they've got to break that. And you get out of that one way. That's your spiritual awakening. But that happens through people who care, getting in contact with other people who care, and trying to help them understand that we do care for them and we are concerned about them. That happens whether you're a little small child or whether you're a great big gorilla. You know, let me tell you, they all turn around from that person-to-person contact. But people have to be willing to make that step, to take that chance, because people are very reticent to do that. You know, it's a question of information, Richard, I think, more than anything else. People do not know that this is how you do that, and it's nothing hard. It's simple.
Okay.
It's
so
simple.
the spiritual awakening is the focal point for the individual.
That's right.
And I guess one question comes to mind. I know of prison ministries where it seems like the approach is to come in and sort of drop Bibles on folks. Is there a difference between the spiritual awakening you're talking about and that kind of approach?
Right. Of course, we just tell people, don't try to put God in the Bible, you know, because the expanse is somewhat greater. And what we say is what you really have to do is get your spiritual life developed. You have to have a relationship with the higher power that we call God. And you've got to understand that that God has an interest in you. And once you begin to recognize that that God is a loving God, then you begin to re-examine your lifestyle and how He might be helping you through that lifestyle.
Before the show, Joan, you were sharing with me about your developing idea of God, and could you just repeat that in terms of the difference, the way you feel about that relationship?
Well, sure. What I was hearing in church, the preachers yelling out about, you know, God's going to get you for this and God's going to get you for that, you know, and I thought, man, I'm God. And then I'd go to Sunday school and I'd learn about this loving Jesus, you know, and I'm thinking, if it wasn't for Jesus, God would have already got me. And I just kind of, I got turned off to organized religion. And then when I made a decision to clean up and quit using drugs and drinking, I did get in touch with a higher power, whom I choose to call God, that is very loving and forgiving, and He has a real neat sense of humor, and I can talk to Him any way I want. I can call Him anything I want to. Maybe I'm just driving down the road and I'm trying to work out a problem, and I say, God, you know, come on, Jake, help me with this one, you know, whatever. And He knows who I'm talking to. He knows I'm talking to Him, and I feel the connection. I have a conscious contact with God.
Well, tell us how that translates in terms of what you do with this Project Rio, where you're trying to get employers to find jobs for people that are coming out of prison.
Okay. Project Rio is a multi-agency initiative. It's with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the Institutional Division, and the Pardons and Paroles Division, and TEC. They get them enrolled in Project Rio while they're still in the institution, and then try to get them connected up with some kind of vocational program and get them to complete their GED or take some college courses, anything that's going to make them more marketable when they get out. And I go around to the different prisons and talk to them and tell them what they can do. I address their alcohol and drug problems because, as everyone knows, at least 85% of everyone who goes to prison has serious alcohol and drug problems. So I encourage them to get started in some kind of 12-step program. We know that anyone getting out of prison that goes to some kind of 12-step program within the first 24 hours has a 50% higher chance of staying out longer. And the longer you're out, the more chance you have of being successful. And then when they do get out, they're referred by their parole officer, they're at the Board of Pardons and Paroles, to Project Rio at TEC. And then they're sent out on interviews to employers that are willing to hire parolees. And, you know, if someone goes to prison from Austin, they're most likely going to come back to Austin because this is their home. This is where their family is.
So you not only go to prisoners and talk about what their options are, but you go to employers.
Sure.
And you make the pitch to them to say, give these folks a chance. And how does it work? How many jobs have been generated by this?
Several. Like I was telling you, we have about 12,000 employers throughout Texas that have been willing to hire parolees. I go and speak at different civic Rotary clubs, Kiwanis, Optimus, different things like that, and get to the employers that way. And any way that I can get to them, I'll go out and speak with them.
And how long has this been going on, that you've got 12,000 throughout the state?
Okay, it started in October of 1985, And since it's been started, 95,524 parolees have been enrolled in this program. And of that number, 65,444 have obtained employment. That is 69%, which is very good.
Oh, I should say.
The important thing about jobs is they're 3 times as likely to remain out with a job as not if they don't have a job.
Exactly.
If you got a job, the chances of recidivism go down.
Significantly. Very significant.
Dukes, I'd like to ask you one other thing about what was just suggested before, that if people want to say, I can either as an employer or as an individual that wants to get connected to other individuals, support the family or the young person that needs assistance. We've touched on that, but the one thing we've not really gone into is if you want to change the system. For instance, before anybody can be released from prison, they have to have a GED, which was one very concrete idea. What's the chances of that, and how do we go about making changes otherwise at the policy level?
The Board of Criminal Justice wants to make changes in the system. Our position as citizens is to support the Board of Criminal Justice and help them and get behind them to make those changes, because it's kind of like pushing 2 guys in a rowboat pushing on the Queen Mary. You know, it's kind of hard to do, but somebody's got to get out there and do it because the system is so deeply rooted. But what we have to do in prisons is change the whole concept. You just can't put people in prisons to languish. They have to be given something to do while they're in that prison.
Now, we're setting all kinds of records of building prisons.
Oh, incredible.
And here we are spending more to put a person in prison and send them to Harvard sort of thing. And
what
do we do? How do we improve that?
But we shouldn't build any more prisons, number one, because that takes the pressure off having to do something with the system. As soon as we get the 130,000 prisoners in 1996, we're going to continue to have the same problem. You've got a dissolute population which needs addressing when they're young, and if they go into prison, when they come back out, and while they're in prison also. You've got to address that population and try to help them understand what's happening to them, why it's happening to them, and what they need to do in order to make that change. Education goes a long way, and they really need to, and what really turns people around, we do retreats in prisons, and they don't remember what we say so much as the fact that we were there. That's the important thing. We were there. That's what makes it. It's person-to-person contact. As I say, I don't care if you're this high or that high, you know.
But if you're depending on the churches and, you know, volunteer agencies to do this, I mean, it probably is going to wind up to be a drop in the bucket unless you can get official programming and official education that's working with massive numbers of people, right?
This is one of the problems, and that we're interested in getting the school districts throughout the state of Texas and the Board of Education to recognize the need for parenting those children in those school districts. And they're going to have to reach out and ask for assistance from the community to provide support groups, mentoring programs, and whatever else they do. That has to happen. But in the communities, we have to help the parole office by developing things like reentry and then sort of making sure they understand it's there.
Give us a number real quick before we take our leave, so that if anybody wants to talk more about it, Dukes DeFore at the Diocese of Austin, I see 476-4888.
Right.
That would be a way that folks could get a hold of you.
And we're dealing with all phases.
Okay, well, we've dealt with a number of phases here today, and we really want to thank you, Joan Dukes, for being with us. And for you folks for joining us. Be with us again next week on our next edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. I'm Richard Thompson, and peace be with you.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.